in starting with a few logistical issues to sort out. One that hasn't been sorted out is we're operating on Bristol time because the clock that I normally rely on to tell me what the time is appears to be 20 minutes slow. Bit like the one on St Nick's Market. So I'll have to bear that in mind or look at my phone as we move through the meeting. I'd like to welcome all my fellow committee members to the committee and to our officers as well, and to everyone who's in the public gallery, and also to welcome anyone who is watching at home at the moment or watching on catch-up as we are being webcast this morning. First of all, the usual safety announcements. If the fire alarm sounds, please proceed out into the main foyer, down the ramp to the right, and the assembly point is outside the cathedral. Unusually for a committee meeting, we are expecting the fire alarm to go off, as it always does for a test, at 10 o'clock. So don't be surprised when that happens. If it's continuous, then it may be for real, and we'll have to follow that procedure. But there will be a test at 10 o'clock. I think all members of committee are indeed present, so there are no apologies or substitutions. So we'll just go on to some introductions. So I'm Stephen Williams. I'm the Liberal Democrat Councillor for Westbury-on-Trim and Henlees. I chair this committee. If I can ask my fellow members to introduce themselves first.
Yeah, hi, I'm Councillor Emily Clark, Labour Councillor for Bedminster Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Hello, I am Lisa Durston, Councillor for Filwood Ward.
Good morning, I'm Carol Johnson, Labour Councillor for Horfield Ward.
Budruddin Henry Brentry, Councillor.
Fee Hans, Green Party Councillor for Redland.
Good morning, I'm Ed Fraser, Green Party Councillor for Eastfield Ward.
Good morning, Abdul Malik, Councillor for Ashley Ward.
Cara Levan, Green Councillor for St George Central.
Thank you very much, members. We've got various officers with us throughout the course of the meeting. They'll introduce themselves when we get to the relevant items. But I'm being assisted today by Bronwyn Maddox, Bronwyn.
Hello, I'm Bronwyn Faulkner, with apologies for losing my voice. I'm the Policy Committee Officer. I promise I don't always sound like this. Thank you.
Which is why we both need water, because we're both croaky this morning. And we've got Ian helping with the information that will be displayed on the screen in the public broadcast as well. Right. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest that members need to make that aren't already in the register of interests? I take that as a no. So we've gone to item 4, which is the minutes of our last meeting, which was on the 27th of June 2025. I've been through them, and apart from one spelling mistake, which I'll tell the clerk about, they seem to be okay. Did anyone else have any issues? In that case, I'll propose them as a correct record of our last meeting.
Happy to second, yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Right, so we agreed that those are a good record of our last meeting. Thank you. Right, we're now going to item 5, which is Chair's announcements. Just got a few things to say. First of all, since we last met, the Committee of Chairs, as we are considering the 2026-2027 budget, have been having a series of meetings. And an early decision that we've made about next year's budget is that the revenue budget of libraries will be completely protected. I announced this at the last full council. I'm just repeating that announcement again today so it can go into the minutes of this meeting, because this is an area of expenditure that's within our remit, but I'm basically repeating what I said at full council. Secondly, this is referred to in the minutes that I had written to the Secretary of State for Department of Environment and Food and Rural Affairs about the costs of ash dieback, which was something we agreed to do when we had the report on that back in May, because there were substantial capital costs and some revenue costs for us in that area. We got a response back from Steve Reed, who at the time was the Secretary of State, in that department, saying the funding was not an issue for his department, and it was an issue for Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and we should write to them, which I thought was a curious, not a one government approach to replying to correspondence, but nonetheless we have written to MHCLG. At the time it was to Angela Rayner, but we've not had a response yet, so I'll have to update you again when we do get a response, which hopefully will be more helpful. Thirdly, and fourthly, both these remarks refer to items that are now published and are on the agenda for the Strategy and Resources Committee on Monday, so do look out for the discussion in that meeting chaired by the leader on Monday. Firstly, that they are making a decision about whether to work with a partner to gradually restore Ashton Court Mansion, which is something that Tony Dyer and myself have been in quite a lot of meetings and discussions about for almost a year now on this issue. A preferred partner has been identified who has set up a trust specifically to do this, and the recommendation for Strategy and Resources next week is that we proceed working with this partner on a preferred basis, and so they can start work on restoring the building. If anyone hasn't been there, Ashton Court has been in a dreadful state for decades and is now effectively not in use, and is a building that is at serious risk, a Grade 1 listed building that is at serious risk. So we need to do something. We've needed to do something for quite a long time, including when I was last a councillor. So this is an issue that successive administrations of all types have not been able to solve, but it looks as though at last we may be able to make progress. But that decision will be confirmed as Strategy and Resources, because it's a property lease issue, on Monday. But obviously Ashton Court does fall within our remit, which is why I mention it. And secondly, because sport also falls within our remit, another report that is going to Strategy and Resources on Monday is to authorise Bristol to be included as a bid city for the UK's bid to FIFA to be a host city and a host country for the Women's Football World Cup, which is in 2035. So it's quite a long time to go in between then and now. But at the moment, the UK is likely to be the only bidder. So our decision is whether we want to be part of that. And clearly that is something I think the council and the city should embrace with great enthusiasm. The Rugby World Cup, Women's Rugby World Cup, which was only just a few weeks ago, was an enormous success for Bristol and for the sport in general. So hopefully Bristol will be part of the growth and development of women's football over the next decade as well. But because that involves major expenditure, that decision is being made by Strategy and Resources on Monday as well. But on the assumption that that decision goes ahead, we'll be hearing more about that over the next 3 years. It's just the 2035 does seem a long way off, and I'll be near a very significant birthday, or fairly significant decade birthday at that time. So who knows whether I'll still be here. Some of you younger members and officers might still be here. Right, so that was what I wanted to say. So if we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the public forum, for which, as usual, we've got set aside 30 minutes, which I don't think will fully exhaust. So if we go through the statements first, and just a reminder to anyone who's going to make a statement, all of the statements that we've received on time are with members. We're with members yesterday to read through, so don't feel the need, unless you want to fully read out the statement. You can extemporise from it, is perfectly fine. I have got an initial indication of whether people are here or not, but we'll just check. The first statement is from Avon and Somerset Police, and it's in support of the Public Spaces Protection Order in Fishponds. Luke Keenan, who I don't think is here. All right. Then I can see that Councillor Louis Martin on the same issue isn't here. Rachel Condon, who is a resident in Fishponds, I don't think is here. Then statement we've got Councillor Ellie Friedman on the subject of dealing with flags in Bedminster, and I can see that Ellie is here. So over to you, Ellie, to make your statement.
Thank you. This is a short version of the statement that you've seen. Ever since the flags were put up on West Street and Duckmore and Luckwall roads by a small group of right-wing men, I have had emails asking me what the council is going to do about it. Residents feel intimidated, threatened and worried. A petition started by a Bedminster resident supported by Stand Up to Racism now has almost 1,000 signatures. We've had incidents of aggression and violence as well as racist graffiti since the flags have been up. While some have been taken down, many remain. The local community has put up signs of welcome and unity. A resident created gorgeous teddy bears to mark Bristol as a city of sanctuary, some of which got damaged and removed. A cross-agency meeting on community safety was cancelled. While I can work with local organisations and groups on activities to build community cohesion, this doesn't feel enough while the flags are up, sending a message of division. I ask the council to take more action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. And the other thing I should have said when we started this section, in statements, there's no interaction. The interaction's in questions, but there is a question about this topic later, so I'll say something then. We've got Carol Casey, who I don't think is here either. Then we've got Sophie Hunter, who, no, is not there. Rebecca Wilson, who was confirmed as attending, but I recognise everyone in the gallery, so I can see she's not here. So if we move on to questions, Rebecca Wilson on business licences for parks, we already know isn't here. Poppy Vaz is not here. Ellie, so we're back to you straight away. You've asked a question on the same topic of flags being raised, in particular in your ward, but obviously this is of citywide interest. So if you'd like to ask a supplementary question, please.
Yeah, thank you for the response. I think, it's obviously in line with what's been put out publicly before. I wanted to ask more about how our approach balances local sensitivities. I'm very aware of the sort of practical issues, but I want to understand a bit more about that, obviously from a community angle. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. I'll give a slightly longer answer than I would normally give to questions, because obviously this is very topical but also very difficult and nuanced issue for all local authorities around the country to discuss, and different authorities are taking different approaches. So our neighbour, South Gloucestershire, has decided that it will take down flags as soon as they can, whether on council land, such as lampposts, whether some people may have seen Points West last night, but that has led to people saying, well, we're going to put them straight back up. So there's potential for conflict in that area. And of course, the people who may be caught up in that conflict are council staff, because lampposts are on the highways. So we have to be mindful about the safety of our own staff, but also try not to get into heightening the situation. If there could be community conflict over one group raising flags and another group taking them down. So we're trying to calm the situation. However, this is the current position of the administration, we will look at each case on a case-by-case basis. If there is a health and safety issue, so for instance, if the flags are perhaps obstructing a sign, obstructing a street light, or causing distress to one household, and we have had a case of that where we was blocking a street light into somebody's bedroom, then the flag will be taken down. But we're not going to, at the moment, we are constantly discussing this on a daily basis. Our current position is that we're not going to uniformly take down all flags that are put up on lampposts or council land across the city. However, where there is particular community concern or concern in a street, and if a ward councillor or residents directly themselves make representations to the council about the distress that might be causing in a particular street, and then we will consider taking action in a safe and appropriate way. So, Ellie, in the case of your residence in Bedminster, you've publicly made representations on behalf of your residents, so iron officers will now go away and consider what we can do about that in order to address those concerns. So, in summary, we'll do things at the moment on a case-by-case basis, but we're not going to systematically take down every flag that goes up on a lamppost. Where symbols, flags are painted on zebra crossings, pillar boxes, somewhere in the public domain, we are removing that as fast as we can, because we think that is completely inappropriate. The last, more general point that I will make, and just in case anyone has any doubt about this, I make this comment as a Welsh person. Putting up a flag in Cardiff or anywhere in South Wales, the Welsh flag is seen in a completely different way. And if any of you visit Cardiff, and I encourage you to do so if you haven't, you'll see Welsh flags everywhere. And that is quite normal. And I think it's very normal in Scotland as well. So this is a situation peculiar to England that it's been allowed to develop, that a small, unrepresentative group of people have perhaps been able to claim ownership of the flag as expressing their particular, as far as I'm concerned, this is a personal viewpoint, perverted view of the effects of immigration and cohesion in our society. The rest of us do have to think carefully about whether we really want to surrender the national flag of England or the Union flag as the symbol of Britain to these people, and to think more carefully about actually should we, as a general community, be showing more pride and ownership of the flag of England and the British flag, and crowd out all the people who want to use it for other means. So that's something we need to work through. And as I've said several times in the past, community cohesion is ongoing work. It never goes away. It's hard work. It's diligent work. It's something we have to continuously do. But this is now rising fast up our agenda. So it's up to all of the politicians around this table from all four parties represented on the council currently to work hard at this agenda, because we know, and this is a political point, there is a fifth party that is coming after us, and we have to respond to that. So that was a long answer, Ellie, but thank you for asking the question. I think this is something that we're going to return to several times, not just on the issue of flags, but community cohesion in general. Right. For you, actually, Ellie, you can ask two supplementaries. I've just realised. If you wanted to have another one, you could.
It's fine. I think you've covered quite a lot in your explanation, and I look forward to working with officers on how we can take forward next steps. I'm already in touch with the community development team and lots of other organisations in the area, but this is something that we really need some action on. So I welcome all support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so questions 8, 9 and 10 are from Ruth Hecht of the Bristol Allotments Forum, and I can see, Ruth, that you are here, so it's nice to see you. You've got the written answers, and you're allowed, as I just said, up to 2 supplementaries.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here again. Thanks to the officers for the answers. These are about staffing in the allotments team, because we're concerned that the services might be going under because of the lack of staffing. So, thank you. So in my supplementary question to the first answer about additional staff is, does the temporary management support that we've been told has been put in place, does that person have a more proactive role in helping to resolve some of the issues on allotment sites? And given we've just been talking about flags, I'd just like to give an example to say what I mean. So on an allotment site in South Bristol, a load of flags have gone up as the type that has just been discussed. And the reps asked the allotment officer what should be done. The allotment officer said they didn't know, so they sort of sent it up the food chain, and the response came back, which was a standard response in relation to flags on roads. In the meantime, a lot of the tenants are very distressed. One's moved their plot and been charged an admin fee for moving their plot because they've been distressed about the flags. So really, that's the sort of issue where it needs someone in a managerial position to be able to say flags on allotment sites have to be taken down because in the tenancy agreement signed by those tenants, there's a clear thing that they've signed to say that tenants shouldn't cause offence to other plot holders. So that's just an example. So of where things are sort of falling down a bit, and we could give dozens of examples of where because at the moment there's only one member of staff. So the question is, can this additional member of staff that's giving managerial support be proactive in helping to resolve some of the issues that are around at the moment?
But thanks, Bruce, for bringing that to our attention. I hadn't anticipated flags and allotments coming together as Right, that was the test. I hadn't anticipated flags and allotments coming together as an issue, but it does show that this area is going to get very complicated. But on the issue of allotment staffing, I don't have anyone from the Parks Service to help me out here, but I do know there have been sickness incidents in the team which has affected performance, and it is reflected in the written answer back. There is an apology for that they're trying to address, and we hope to recruit a new person into the allotments service very shortly, hopefully this month. Just to remind committee members, it is almost to the day that we made a decision on allotments rents. And of course, it was a 12-month notice, so allotment rents are about to go up, and part of the income from that is to finance the recruitment of that new officer. So the team is under-resourced at the moment, both because of sickness and the new person hasn't been recruited. But I hope that's going to be resolved very, very soon. You have a second supplementary?
Yeah, my second question is, this new officer post was actually supposed to be recruited in April, and the process for recruitment did start in April, but then got halted because of an internal reorganisation. So can the cost saving from that post actually be used to contract someone to do some strategic work around specific issues, for example, capital spend on allotments?
That's a good question, which I'm reluctant to give a total yes or no answer, but it is a good suggestion. But because the relevant chief officers aren't with us this morning, I won't say emphatically yes to it, but I will certainly take that back to Richard Fletcher, who is now head of the overall service, and ask him to consider that if there has been a revenue saving, which logically there has been. But it is certainly the intention, as I said when you were last here, to work constructively and positively with your forum to make sure that we have a good allotment service in the city, so that all plots are let. And I notice in the preambles to one of your questions, you're saying that some of our allotments are unused and unlet at the moment, which is a very disappointing situation to be in, because we know there is a waiting list. So we know there are issues to address in the allotment service, and there is both the political will, and actually there's the officer will there to do that. And going forward, we did commit a year ago, once this new officer is in place, to have a review of the allotments service, to look at the structure of charges, to make some changes perhaps, but some of the service conditions. But that review would very much be done with you and not to you.
Thank you.
The next question is from Tim, who I think is Tim Beasley, who I think is sitting next to you. So Tim, you also have up to 2 supplementaries.
Thank you, committee. It's probably very obvious to you all that we've posed these questions essentially to remind you all of what you decided exactly 1 year ago. Whilst your headline decisions 1 year ago was to do with the rent increase at 52%, substantially more than cumulative inflation at the time, you also made a number of other decisions. And I regard the officer's response in the public forum pack as at best glossing over the situation. In the last perhaps week, we've received a flurry of emails from the allotment office and from a senior officer attempting to address many of the issues that they were mandated on a year ago. But the fact of the matter is that with the exception of the rent notification increase letter sent out last October and the rent invoices that came out this week, very little has actually been progressed at all. So we have a problem again where rents are up, but service levels continue to worsen. And not just for the last year, but this goes back now for many years. The committee of the Allotment Forum has met recently with a councillor on the committee who's agreed to be a liaison point with us. That meeting focused predominantly on trying to come up with solutions to some of these problems, looking at what allotmenteers themselves can do to help. And a lot of that is already happening. But I guess my question in some ways is an invitation to the chair of the committee, who did meet with some of us about 14 months ago in the run-up to last October's decisions, that if he would like to get a more detailed understanding of the failings of the allotment service currently, that our door is always open and we'd be very happy to meet, perhaps with the chair and with the person that we're currently liaising with.
Yeah, Tim, as I demonstrated last year when we were last making significant decisions about the allotment service, I'm very much open to as much dialogue as possible to make sure there are no misunderstandings and we learn from the people who are actually using the allotments. Councillor Levan has kindly agreed to be the main liaison point in between the committee and yourselves. So Cara and I will have a chat about perhaps setting up a joint meeting with Ruth and your fellow officers so we can discuss all of these issues, and perhaps we do that initially as just the two members and yourselves, so you can be as candid and we can be as candid as possible. Then we'll take it back to the officers. Cara, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to say, I met earlier this week with the Allotment Forum and we had a really constructive and lengthy discussion, and we've got a set of proposals to move forward at this point, but I wanted to wait till after this meeting today to send that through to you. So we're definitely moving in the right direction, and a firm dialogue has begun.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for taking on that invitation as well. Tim, do you have a second supplementary?
Yes, I do have a quick supplementary question. You'll remember that the original allotments consultation started in December 2023 and ended at the end of January 2024. A partial report purely on the rent increase aspect was produced by the then relevant cabinet member Ellie King in late February, March 2024. But the full report on the entire consultation and analysis of all the responses has yet to have been produced, or certainly not shared with any of us, almost 20 months after the consultation started. Is committee aware of this failing?
I wasn't necessarily aware that the report of that consultation hadn't been published. It's generally a political consensus that one administration doesn't publish or comment on stuff done by the previous administration. So it couldn't be purely my decision whether to publish that report. That's something I have to consult Councillor King about as well. But of course, that consultation was about issues that are, to some extent, in terms of the questions we've been asked anyway, not relevant, because we've committed to having a new review of the service in a more collaborative way going forward, just to go back to my previous answer, once this new officer is in place. So I'm not sure whether publishing something about issues that are effectively now well in the past is necessarily going to be helpful going forward. But I'm happy to take that to perhaps with the Vice Chair, to Councillor King and ask for her views about that. But I think at this stage it's probably better to look forward rather than go back over the past. You don't get a third supplementary, but
it's just a very quick response to that. We're aware that we're waiting for further stakeholder consultation, but the report on the previous consultation was expected, and we were told that it would be an analysis of it would be used to inform the next round of consultation.
Right. Okay, Tim. We've all heard what you've said, and Cara and I will look at that, and with Emily, perhaps discuss it with Councillor King as well. But I think it's probably more useful that we look forward and get the next review as right as we can. Thank you for your questions, both of you. And the final set of questions were from Councillor Hucker, who I can see is not here. But the written answers about the former Whitchurch athletics track are worth a read by members of the committee who may be getting representations about this. And of course, there have been questions and statements at full council about this issue as well. But the written answers here, which will be in the record, are very useful. Right, so that concludes the public access session, and I can now see by looking at that clock, not only is it wrong, it's actually stuck, but I think we were within our half an hour for that section. So we move now on to agenda item 7, which is for the public spaces protection order in an area of Fishponds. And for members, this is on the 14th page of our agenda pack. Public spaces protection order has to be about a defined geographical area. There is a map in the appendix showing the area of Fishponds that is proposed to be covered by this public spaces protection order. It's something that we've responded to as a result of community concerns from residents, from local members and from the police. And just to refer back to the statements in the public access session, we've got statements from both the ward members, Councillor Martin and Councillor Al-Maghrabi, and from the police and a resident as well, in support of this. So bear those in mind. But to give the professional introduction to this report, we've got Penny German, who's our Head of Communities. We've also got Richard Hawkridge. I'm reading your job title, Richard, which is Deputy Manager of Safer Communities, but basically you look after antisocial behaviour amongst a range of other issues for us. So Penny will introduce, and if there are questions, both Penny and Richard are available to answer questions. So over to you, Penny.
Thank you very much. So a Public Space Protection Order, or PSPO, is a legal tool introduced under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014, and it's designed to help councils and their partners tackle antisocial behaviour in public spaces. There is clear evidence that antisocial behaviour incidents and offences have increased in a specific area of Fishponds following the ending of the previous Public Space Protection Order in 2023. This is supported by both police and City Council data, as well as reports from local stakeholders. Police data shows a rise in ASB incidents and offences since the PSPO expired. You will see from the report that there is a high level of support from community stakeholders, with 95% of respondents expressing their support for the introduction of a new PSPO. And the details are set out in the appendices and in the engagement report. As the Chair has said, the proposed PSPO will apply to a clearly defined area, and that can be seen on page 23 of the PDF pack. Within this area, the PSPO would grant powers to police officers, to police community support officers, and to authorised council officers to require individuals to stop consuming alcohol in public and to confiscate alcohol and alcohol containers. Failure to comply would be an offence, and the details of this can be found in the legal advice of the report. The PSPO will provide an effective added tool for officers in the disruption of alcohol-related ASB and would assist the efforts to support individuals who are involved in the ESB by providing clear boundaries. And it should be said that in our approach to ASB and drug and alcohol-related ASB, an integral part of that support is supporting people with access to services and support. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Any questions or observations from members? Lisa?
Thanks very much for that, Penny. And yeah, thanks to Councillors Al McGrobby and Martin for bringing this back to committee. You've just mentioned actually working with sort of people that might be identified as being vulnerable, or how can we ensure that they won't be kind of disproportionately affected potentially by reintroducing a PSPO?
I think I'll let Rich talk about the kind of service response, because that's all about how we treat those individuals, and it's very important for us that we're not simply that we're supporting them, we're not simply moving a problem on, but that we're taking a very human-centred approach. So, Rich, would you like to just explain how we do that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the work we do with our partners in policing is pretty important with this. So the neighbourhood policing teams, they're taking what we would term an antisocial behaviour approach to this, and our street intervention service, they're closely linked in to support that approach. And essentially the approach is to identify individuals that are engaged in that sort of behaviour that's challenging for communities, but also, you know, is problematic for them themselves. Try and identify what support they might need in terms of alcohol and substance misuse, money, housing, health and behaviour, and then try and put interventions in place for that. So I think the PSPO strengthens that, because it enables the police to engage with individuals, identify those individuals, get their details, and then allows services like the Street Intervention Service to go and do that work, and also look to, you know, link in with Horizons, our drug and alcohol service, to make sure those individuals are being supported.
Thanks very much. I've got comments with a few different hats on here. Firstly, just want to echo what Lisa said and heap praise on Councillors Al McGrobby and Councillor Martin for bringing this forward. I think perhaps previously the ball had been dropped on this one, and as a result of there being no measures in place, clearly antisocial behaviour has risen in the immediate area around the park and the high street and Fishponds, and I think they've reacted to the situation really brilliantly, consulted with the local community, consulted with the police, and I praise the work of Luke Keenan and his team as well, who've been having to deal with lots of very serious issues of antisocial behaviour in the area, including arson, not too far away in Albury Court and over in my own ward. So fair play to them both, credit where credit's due. I think they've done a really good job on this. I will comment briefly as a ward councillor, because 0.1% of this is actually in Eastfield Ward, just the little stretch of road on the way to Aldi and Morrison's and the Fishponds Library, and a little bit on Channons Hill. But simply to echo that that as a ward councillor, I'm happy with those boundaries, and I think it fairly reflects the perimeter of where these antisocial behaviour issues may occur, and that actually that kind of behaviour does sort of dissipate the further east you head on the Fishponds Road as it becomes a bit more residential in character. So I wanted to ask though a question just around the nature of enforcement. I feel confident about the answer to this, but this is more to seek reassurance, because I know there have been a minority of comments that have expressed concerns around kind of civil liberty type concerns about the way it would be applied. So to be clear, the target here isn't people who may be outside one of the various pubs on that stretch and have maybe stepped slightly over onto the pavement with a pint. The target is not say a group of UE students having the last sip of their tinnies before they get on the 49 bus into town for a night out. But the target will be those people who are engaging in drunken disorderly behaviour, particularly around the park, but along this stretch, the neighbouring streets itself, and around getting them help and support and having the ability to confiscate alcohol. Can I just check that's more reflective of what the application of these powers is likely to be?
Yeah, it's about tackling persistent antisocial behaviour. Yeah.
Thank you. Great to get that reassurance on record.
Abdul?
Thank you, Chair. So most of the questions that I was going to ask have been addressed, but there is one fundamental question here about so in 2023, this was maybe not reinstated, and so 2 years on, we've realised that we need to get this up and running again. But did we have any statistics about the displacement at that point? Where does the antisocial behaviour from there then go? And what areas, what councillors now need to be ready to maybe counter some of the displacement of this? Is there any evidence from the 2023 when it was pulled?
Let Rich come in terms of, so the boundary's been drawn with the evidence that we have in terms of where the antisocial behaviour is, and then the period of time where since the last one has ended, we've kind of taken a fresh look at where the antisocial behaviour is happening. But I don't know, Rich, whether you want to comment on.
Yeah, I mean, I think to an extent, although there was a PSPO in place, and now there's hopefully will be a new PSPO in place if everyone's in support. It's actually a different PSPO in that it's different boundaries. So it, as Penny said, it reflects the evidence that we are seeing now. And in terms of displacement, I think that's a potential risk. The work that I talked about in terms of supporting people, that doesn't just happen in areas that are subject to public space protection orders. Most of the city isn't, and that work goes on citywide. So I think that will undoubtedly help to address any displacement, and also it's something that we will keep under review. Keep an eye on, and if there does seem to be significant displacement, then we can look to review and potentially change the boundaries if that seems helpful.
Yeah, just one final reflection or question in terms of, because it seems the PSPO, the local councils have been involved with this. I mean, how many of these PSPOs do we have across the city? And the mechanism, so I'm thinking about my ward specifically. I know Richard will know what I'm trying to get to here, but how much does it take to get there? Has this been a long process? What evidence base were you needing to get here? Just for councillors and the public, I suppose, to know. And how many of these do we have in the city?
So currently we don't have any in the city. Perhaps after today, PSPOs in terms of no street drinking, that is. There's PSPOs that are dog control zones to prevent dog fouling, that sort of thing. But there aren't any no street drinking PSPOs in the city currently. It has taken some time to bring this through and to look at the evidence and do the necessary consultation. We do have a process by which people can highlight a particular issue that they feel may benefit from a public space protection order, and really quite simply, there's the email address antisocialbehaviour@bristol.gov.uk. People can write into that, and the team can pick that up. There's a sort of internal triage process, and then we look to see if there is enough of a body of evidence to consider, and then get onto this more formal decision-making pathway. So, yeah, if people wanted to explore that, we can look at it.
Thanks. Two useful questions there about displacement. It's a bit like whenever you introduce a residence parking zone, you know the boundary. People are going to the behaviour is going to be displaced to the neighbouring community. So I guess this is something we'll need to keep an eye on. If there is a ban on street drinking in this part of Fishponds, will that mean that people who want to do that start doing it in Eastville or Hillfields, for that matter, instead? So that's something we'll need to be mindful of. And of course, we do have other types of PSPOs because we passed two at an earlier meeting of this committee, but that was on street sales. But this is the first one to ban street drinking. If there are no other questions, I will move the recommendation, which is quite straightforward, is that this committee approves the introduction of a public spaces protection order in the mapped area of Fishponds as set out in the appendix to our report, which is in section 3 and on page 23 of our pack. So I move that. Could I have a seconder?
Yeah, seconded.
Thank you, Emily. So that is proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So that is passed unanimously. Right. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Richard. We'll now have one changeover at the top table for agenda item 8, which is a new thing for the committee, something I'm introducing across all the various areas that this committee is responsible for. The trigger point for things coming to this committee under the Council's constitution is quite strict. There has to be expenditure over £500,000 or an issue that affects 2 wards, and we know we've taken quite a lot of big contracts through this committee in our first year and a half or so. But there isn't that much flexibility for members of the committee to be involved in the evolution of that decision. But there are lots of things that come under our remit that I see as chair, because I do it more or less full time. And I've realised over the last year there are an awful lot of incredibly important functions that are carried out on the public's behalf, which our committee is responsible for, but will never reach that threshold, really, of having to make a major decision, but they do deserve their place in the sun. Therefore, I'm instituting a programme of annual reports. Of course, we already have the annual report of the Director of Public Health, which we've considered the first one of our term so far. But the other areas of our committee, there's been no precedent for having annual reports. So we are going to see a series of these coming forward now. Environmental health, which we're about to consider, is our first one. Trading standards will be the next one. And then in time, we'll have an annual report about the library service, and a report about parks as well going forward. But the first two are coming up today, and it's a pleasure to welcome, as well as Christina, as the Director of Public Health, who's ultimately responsible for this area, but an officer who's not been before the committee before, Adrian Jenkins, who is the head of environmental health. I mean, the covering report sets out all of the areas covered by environmental health, which Adrian will speak to shortly, but there is a sort of full report appended to that as well, which sets out all of those functions and brings to life everything from being the municipal rodent catchers to inspecting restaurants, to being responsible for port health and a lot else besides. I've been out on visits with members of Adrian's team so far, and it is very interesting to see what they do, and more visits are planned, including how we inspect tattoo parlours, which is a growing business on our high street. I'm not sure whether I want to watch someone being tattooed, but we'll see how that visit goes. Right, Adrian, I've warmed you up, so over to you to give the professional introduction to the report, and I hope members will have lots of questions for you. Off you go.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I'm here today to talk about the Environmental Health Annual Report. This is an overview of the main activities, as Stephen mentioned. They're contained in Appendix A. But the Environmental Health team is a highly specialist team. It focuses on delivering core statutory functions for the Council. The main aim is to give advice, support and help to businesses, but then take enforcement action where businesses are non-compliant for various things, but the focus is on helping the business. So we deal with many complaints from the public. We work and give advice to businesses across the whole city. We have got a particular focus on helping the vulnerable, particularly in pest control, and the focus limited resources on high-risk activities in each of the areas, which I'll come on to talk about. The 5 key statutory functions that we cover are food safety service, so that's your food safety inspections, when you go out and have food out and about. We've got the Port Health Service, which covers Royal Portbury Dock and Avonmouth docks, pollution control and pest control, infectious disease control, and the Health and Safety Service. The aim is to prevent serious harm and protect public health and safety through what we do, whether it's through investigations of complaints, accidents, or undertaking inspections, etc. We deal with a lot of partners, some of them regulators as well. So we work very closely with the UK HSA, which is the UK Health and Security Agency. We work closely with the Food Standards Agency. They do come in and audit our functions as well and make sure the council is performing to the right level, undertaking its inspections in terms of port health and food safety. We also deal with the HSC very closely, DEFRA, working with the police, trading standards, neighbourhood enforcement team. So we're very joined up with other teams on joint investigations. So Appendix A gives a bit more detail. I'll just give you a flavour of what we do and then take it from there. So in relation to food safety, there's an annual sort of programme of inspections. There are about 4,700 food businesses in Bristol, so that's quite a lot. It's one of the largest number in the UK for a local authority of this size. And we inspect them on a risk basis. So annually, we inspect about 2,000 inspections. We publish the score, the rating on the food hygiene rating scheme, which is published by the FSA. So if you're booking your Christmas party or any other sort of event, you could go onto that, look up the rating. A 0 is very, very poor, and I wouldn't recommend a 0 rating. Luckily, we haven't got too many of them. But in relation to a good premises, a 5 is really good. And anything above the 3, you're going to be okay with, because that is satisfactory. But we deal with numerous complaints, from food complaints to premises complaints, dirty, filthy premises, rat infestations in premises, etc. And we're working with the business then to make sure they resolve that immediately. We also give advice to businesses. It's a big turnover of businesses in Bristol. It was about 800, but we've just done the figures for this year so far. It's 500 so far this year, the turnover of businesses. So we've got to check those businesses, give them advice, make sure they're on the right track so they can get a good hygiene rating. And we don't stop dealing with them until they've got a rating of 3 or above. So 98% of businesses in Bristol will have will be compliant annually. But at any one time, that will vary depending on where we are in helping that business. So I'll move on now to Bristol Port Health Authority. Bristol's quite unique in that the council is responsible for port health at Royal Portbury Docks, which is in North Somerset, and in Avonmouth Docks. That's to facilitate the port company only having to deal with one council. But basically, we've got a multi-million-pound facility which is built by the government and the port company, and is shared with Border Force. And we undertake a range of checks of imported food coming in from all over the world, products from China, products from the EU, products that end up in the local supermarkets and national supermarkets. We also have a really important role in terms of safe management of the border, making sure infectious diseases don't get into the country. So we do check about 1,000 maritime declarations of health. So say you're the ship's captain, you're coming into Bristol, we know you're coming in, we check where you're coming from, we know the high-risk areas. The ship then will have to give this report in. If there is anyone ill on board, we can make arrangements to get medical care and help prevention of spread in the community. So it's really important, really positive role that we sort of undertake there. It's a 24/7 service, again, working really closely with the port company, the MCA, UK HSA, and it's sort of really focused on making sure imported food is dealt with properly. We also help vulnerable crew. We do get ships where crew come in who are coming from all over the world, maybe not being paid the same hourly rates as we get in this country. And we work with the Merchant Navy Welfare Board and the chaplains who are based at the port to make sure there's care and welfare for those people as well. I'll move on to pollution control briefly. So this area mainly covers complex pollution issues, issuing environmental permits similar to the Environment Agency, so paint spraying booths, mineral processing. So we work really closely with the Environment Agency. We do issue these permits across the city. We also deal with planning applications, contaminated land. So all planning applications have to have an assessment for contaminated land. So you're not building on a previous contaminated site. We also give advice on noise and amenity to the planning applications. Another interesting area that we deal with is pest control. So pest control is a unique service. It is self-sufficient in terms of its funding. It is income generating, so it doesn't cost the council anything. But it's not designed to compete with the private sector, although we have got some commercial contracts. The aim is to provide a good value service for vulnerable tenants of Bristol City Council. So we do a huge amount of work with the landlord services properties. We undertake approximately 3,800 visits per year. Okay, so that's over 1,000 properties where we're treating for rats, mice, insects, and a lot of people, cannot afford to pay high rates in terms of some costs relating to this. So we work really closely with housing, landlord services, and adult social care, and we help make referrals then for safeguarding where we find particular issues in relation to pest control. But it's a really interesting area of work. We also cover infectious disease control in the city, so working very closely with Christina's public health teams, the UKHSA, NHS, and we look at helping people who have got an infectious disease. So say you've got food poisoning, or you've been abroad, or you've picked up something, the doctor notifies UKHSA. We then will investigate the potential causes and sources of the illness. So it's very much investigate, find the source if we can, and prevent then it spreading in the community. So it's a really positive service. We also deal with skin piercing, tattooists, etc., cosmetic and beauty practices. So some of these are regulated, so we would issue registrations to the premises, make sure they're dealing with things hygienically. There are various checklists and standards, and Bristol has its own bylaws, which we have to make sure that they're implementing, so we don't get spread of anything in the community. So again, it's about protecting public health, really positive service there. We do about 250 of those a year. It's sort of a growing area of businesses in Bristol. So the last area that I'd like to talk about is health and safety. So you might wonder why health and safety. Don't the HSE do that? But Bristol City Council has a duty to investigate accidents in the city. And it mainly applies to smaller businesses, warehouses, supermarkets, cinemas, whereas the HSE would be checking large industrial processes, larger sort of organisations, etc. They would enforce on the council as well. But we do the smaller stuff, the day-to-day stuff that we all use every single day. So we investigate a number of accidents during the year. We also regulate the two designated sports grounds. You've got Ashton Gate, and you've got the Rovers ground in Filton area. So basically, we will go in and we issue general safety certificates. So we work with the police, fire brigade, building control, licensing, etc. And we work and chair the Safety Advisory Committee. And then we agree the capacities for the stadia. We sign off the risk assessments. We undertake inspections of the grounds, and we undertake in-performance inspections. So, for example, during the Women's Rugby World Cup, we had a team of officers at the stadia, at the games, making sure everything was okay on board, working really closely with licensing, the events team, and other partners, making sure it's all done safely. And we do that for all the games in the city. During the year, during the seasons for rugby, football. We also look at the cricket ground as well. And we do checks on events as well across the city. during the years. We've got teams of officers that have joined up with other officers and checked the events are all working well. We recently had an audit from the oversight body for safety at sports grounds, which basically said Bristol was performing to a high level. So overall, the service is doing really well. We do deal with some very difficult cases. We did have a prosecution where a frozen load did come off some racking and landed on a staff member, and they had terrible injuries, and that resulted in a fine to the business of £760,000. So some of these things are quite serious, but the business now is fully compliant and working really well. So the service covers all those main areas, and I'm happy to take any questions if you've got any. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Adrian. That was really good overview, and there's lots of detail in this first annual report of the service as well. So, members, any questions? So I've got Emily, Lisa, everybody. Good. Right, I'll work round. This is probably going to be the easiest way to do it. Emily first.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, with things like infectious disease control, and I guess potentially port and things like that, like to what extent, well, all of it, do you kind of have like any like lessons learned processes for where there are outbreaks? And I guess it also potentially applies to pandemic and things like that. Like, do you reflect on patterns and...
Yeah, thanks. I'll take that one. So what Adrian was describing were the powers and duties and functions that sit within the environmental health team. Now, that team has particular, as you could hear, very high level of expertise around particularly food safety. It is the UK Health Security Agency and the public health system that is responsible for preparation and response for all incidents and outbreaks of infectious disease control. So Adrian's team play a part in that, but that's a public health duty and responsibility. And the work on that, in fact, if you look at the COVID inquiry, there's some recommendations that are coming out of that, and we will be bringing forward our communicable disease strategy for Bristol, which will lock in with the national, which is where all of that comes together. And Adrian's team contributes to that along with a number of other.
Right, I'll take a green question next. Fee, you've got.
Yes, mine was around food hygiene inspections of restaurants and other premises. And I seem to recall a while back there was a massive backlog of these. Are we confident that we're on top of it now?
With the inspections that we inspect, because they're inspected on a risk basis, every time we go in, the risk changes. So a good premises could become a bad premises and vice versa. So we are working through the backlog, and we've got the officers focus on the high risk work, and we use external contractors then to pick up some of the work to help us reduce the backlog. So at the moment it has reduced, and we're working, we constantly work and try and get that backlog as small as possible. The Food Standards Agency, we have to give them a regular report on a quarterly basis, and they monitor us closely. So we are fully aware and keep on top of that fee. Thanks.
Lisa?
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions on the pest control service. Am I right in thinking that that's currently in-house, the pest control that we do?
Yeah, the pest control service is in-house service. There's 3 officers who undertake the work, and they're very, very busy dealing with mainly the council tenanted properties. Yeah.
Thank you. And so are we looking to retain that as an in-house service going forward?
Yeah, a number of years ago it did cost, it was costing the council money, but we've turned it round and we are now cost neutral, so it's not costing the council anything at all.
Great, thank you. Sorry, it's actually 3 questions. The other one is around how you work with housing or possibly parks when there's issues with things like rats that are maybe on a neighbouring property to one of our council tenants, or on land that their property backs onto that might be parks land, it might be housing land, but sometimes it's unadopted land. So it's thinking of sort of particular areas in Filwood where it's then often an area that has a lot of fly tipping on it, and then that causes rats. And sometimes it seems hard to address those particular issues. How do you work with across those different...
Yeah, we work really closely with the neighbourhood enforcement team who deal with fly tipping and waste. So we would do a joint visit and check the area concerned. And if it's council land, obviously we can do the work for the council, or parks. We do most of the parks work. We do all the parks work. And then if it's private land, as environmental health officers, we've got powers. We could serve legal notice on private landowners to require them to deal with any infestations. So we have got quite good powers. And if you've got any particular complaints, I'm happy to help you after the meeting.
I'm just wondering how that works with a bit of land that's classified as being unadopted.
You mean a private piece of land?
Well, it doesn't seem to belong to anyone.
Yeah, if it's a serious infestation, we would undertake that on behalf of the council as a public health matter, because we wouldn't be able to just leave it.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
It's probably worth saying that that is precisely one of the reasons that's really important to retain an in-house service. So, you know, if you need pest control within your own home, you can press the button, you get the private companies come and they do the three visits. The work that this team does is highly specialised. They work with some of our most vulnerable clients, as Adrian's described, and where we've got unadopted land like that, where nobody will take responsibility, then we've got the resource to do that. It's a very small team, and they work incredibly hard, but without that in-house resource, it would be a problem. Yeah.
Thanks. Cara?
My question's a little bit of a follow-on from Fee's about the Food Standard Agency, and I saw that there's a shortage of qualified food standard inspectors in Bristol. Is there anything the council or councillors can do to help, and what are you doing to recruit people for that kind of work?
Yeah, there's a national shortage of environmental health officers. So several years ago, my department moved into public health, and Christina supported the use of environmental health apprentices. So now we've got a number of apprentices in the first year, second year and third year of the environmental health course. And providing we can, offer them a job, we're hoping to retain those. So we've got some service continuity and succession planning. So yeah, we're thinking about that all the time. I'm hoping to get some more apprentices in the next financial year as well. Christina, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to say that the apprentice schemes the apprentices are phenomenal, and if you wanted to meet any of them, they are fantastic. It's a brilliant scheme. It recruits young people or people from non-traditional backgrounds. They end up with a degree, a professional qualification, and they're fantastically skilled. They've been a real fantastic addition, and I think Jonathan might be about to say that they've also got apprentices over in trading standards as well, but the apprentice schemes are fantastic. It's a brilliant investment for the city, and we've got them all over the council. But yeah, we definitely want to do more. We've got public health apprentices, environmental health apprentices, and I think we're going to have community development apprentices as well. So yeah, it's a great programme.
Also, I was not an apprentice, but I was a trainee environmental health officer when I was training in Bristol many years ago.
That sort of leads me to a small follow-up. What would you say is your favourite part of your job?
Don't tell any of my team, but it's food safety. 10 years of food safety. Yeah, it's really, really, I like it. I wish they would put the ratings, I wish it was mandatory to display the ratings like it is in Wales, as Stephen mentioned. But unfortunately, it's not a requirement at the moment. But interestingly enough, many of the food delivery platforms will only put businesses on their platforms that have got a minimum of 3. So that's really positive. That drives compliance up then, which is really positive. Thank you.
Yeah, actually I didn't mention it, Adrian, but you've heard me say it many times before, so you've probably thought I had. But yes, it is an unfortunate anomaly that the 0 to 5 rating is compulsory to be shown at restaurants, in bars, whatever, in Wales, but not in England. But it is compulsory to show them on the Food Standard Agency's website, and I've permanently got that on my phone. So whenever you're going out for lunch, dinner, whatever in Bristol, you can actually look up what the rating is. This isn't an advert, but I think several of us often go to Woods over the road, a traditional lunch spot for councillors and officers, and that does have a 5 rating. So that's good. But it's worth having that on your phone to check where you're going. Some of you may remember, because we had a meeting at the same time last year. Tomorrow, actually, this time is my birthday, so I'm going to a restaurant tonight. And I haven't checked, I've just thought, but I will check shortly. Right, Ed.
That reminds me, I'm going out for dinner tonight and I haven't checked the rating either, but I've got to say, Chair, I'm not sure it's appropriate to be endorsing particular cafes nearby in Park Street. So just say other cafes are available in the vicinity.
Including our own now downstairs, which I have to say is actually quite good. So I don't know what its rating is, but
it's lovely. But anyway, this is quickly turning into a series of advertising. I'm getting flashbacks of Michael Gove in 2010 here. So I wanted to just ask, related to that last question on displaying notices here, and of course we understand that it's not compulsory to do so in England. What tools, techniques do your team use, and can we use as members to encourage food outlets within our own wards to display food hygiene ratings? I get if you've got a low rating, you're not very well incentivised to do so, and if you've got a high one, you are. But what tools and techniques do we have at our disposal to encourage their usage?
So if a premises has a 0, 1, etc., we inform them that their business could suffer, for example, because people will see the scores. We give them materials and help. And if you do have a 0, 1 or 2, we will go back and keep inspecting on a regular basis and encourage you to get your score up to a 3 or above. And if businesses don't get up to a 3, they could face formal action, then like a legal notice, or they could be prosecuted in severe cases. So that's what we would do. We encourage them, but mainly the businesses don't want a 0 or 1 or 2, because they might, after a few weeks, trade can drop off, and then that's costing them a lot of money then, and they're there to make money at the end of the day, as well as serve customers. So we always encourage them to get the better rating, as it's good for their business, it promotes business, it's good for the community. It doesn't look good if businesses have got a 0, 1 or a 2. And people soon realise then they want to put the sticker up when it's a 3, 4, 5, but they don't when it's a 0, 1 or 2. So that's what I would encourage, just encourage them to do that for those reasons.
Thank you, Adrian. And related to that, and perhaps drawing a bit on your knowledge of the hygiene rating system in Wales, are there any stipulations about where within the store in terms of visibility that they have in Wales to display them? I can think of instances where I've been into somewhere where maybe they've got a low hygiene food rating and perhaps left pretty soon after, where actually they are displaying the notices, but displaying them in places which are quite difficult to see.
Yes, we have come across some examples where they're tucked in the corner. It'd be very difficult to see those ratings, but we recommend, particularly when it's a good rating, you put it in a really prominent area so people can see that rating, because that could give them an advantage then if they've got a 5 over someone who's got a 4. So it's market forces then dictate, where they're going to put that sign, but we can't force them to put the sign in a prominent area. But like you said, in Wales, it is an offence to not put it in a prominent place. I have seen many of those in Wales as well. Thank you.
You'll all be relieved to know I won't name it, but I've looked up the all-you-can-eat rather well-known restaurant in Bristol on the Triangle, and it does have a 5 rating, so I'll be safe tonight.
More adverts.
All my friends will be as well. Just
from
a
gluttony,
point on food ratings, because I've been out with your chief officer in that area on an inspection of a new business. It was on the Gloucester Road, where there's quite often new businesses coming forward, and they were initially given I think it was a 3 rating, and were distraught about this and immediately wanted to know what they could do to get a higher rating. So your team does also give people the advice of how they can get a 4 or 5, don't they?
Yes, it's really good. It's not just businesses that are non-compliant want us to get the scores up. A lot of them who maybe have a 3 or a 4. They want a 5, they strive for a 5. So we encourage them to strive for the 5, because the 5 is the gold standard. And that is a huge marketing tool then, if they're advertising or promoting their business. So as Stephen said, it's really, really good to do that.
Right, Abdul, I think you had a question.
Yeah, Chair, so firstly, I might need to apologise that I should have declared an interest, because I have food businesses across the city that are part of the star ratings, and I'm happy to report that we're up there in the 4s and 5s, majority of them 5. Just wanted to say, first of all, pay real tribute to those officers that kind of worked really hard. We've got a good relationship with most of the officers, especially I'd like to mention Sarah, Hoddesall and Asif, who do a really good job across Eastern and Eastville, especially with the minority communities. Really difficult sometimes to get the message across and to get people to enrol into the educational processes to understand how they can lift their scores. So just wanted to say that. My questions have been answered. They were about the staffing, because obviously that has an effect on the way that we kind of look after our food businesses within these wards. So it's important that we do have enough officers, and there is the pressure on the officers so they can work with the businesses. And so in that respect, you've also told me about the apprenticeships. I was going to mention that, there should be an opportunity for universities and other places to provide apprenticeship opportunities with the council, but that's already been mentioned as well. So all good. The last thing that I was going to say about the port health was that the government grants are being cut, we saw in the report, and is there a plan to kind of uplift them, or what's going to happen if that grant is pulled? Thank you.
We've been reviewing our fees and charges in terms of what we can charge importers, but we want the port to remain competitive as well. If we put our charges up too high, we're non-competitive then with other ports across the country. So we are working, always constantly reviewing those and making sure that we do charge, where we can charge, we do charge. And Christina, we work closely with Christina's team to look at income streams as well. And we keep a constant review of that. There are some small grants available which we apply for on an annual basis, but not to the scale we have previously. And it is a constant thing that we're looking at.
I just want to mention about the 0-star rating. Sometimes that could be a new business. Sometimes it can be an issue like I had with pigeons, and the RSPCA is involved, so a temporary 0 is given, but usually I suppose if it's a 1 to 5 it's more judgmental, but on a 0 it's difficult to judge a business.
Most businesses, unless it's an exceptional matter, if you were given a 0, a 1 or a 2, for example, under the Food Standards Agency national guidance, you're supposed to wait 3 months before you re-rate. So if they were inspected today and they were a 0, they could become a 5 within 3 months. So it's a short period of time, because we've got to make sure that we're confident in the business in terms of what they're doing and they're keeping on top of things. But with new businesses, we try our best to help them as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, on the topic Abdul raised about the costs and the budget, you can see at the end of the introductory report that this costs the council, the net cost is just under 1.6 million, and we do bring in some revenue for charges, as Adrian's mentioned, the port, and I guess there are some cross charges to the housing revenue account as well, but there have been some government grants, I think possibly from the Home Office or DEFRA. Are we exposed going forward for losing any funding coming through, and is there going to be a revenue pressure that we're going to have to look out for?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So there is some revenue pressure which we are looking to address. You will see it come through as a pressure in the next budget. We need to balance the grants. The grants are time limited and do enable us to do work. They've enabled us to do things like employ the apprentices, for example. Income generation, as Adrian's mentioned, we need to maximise that where we can do so and where it's not counterproductive, remembering that this is a public health service. And indeed with the port, there are sort of commercial and economic interests that we don't want to destabilise by overcharging locally. But the core budget, as all council budgets, has been considerably reduced. and is flying slightly lower than it needs to be. So while we're looking at all possible contingencies, I think we would be looking for a small uplift in the coming budget, just to enable us to keep over the line. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members wishing to? Carol?
Yeah, just an observation of the conversation that we've had throughout, that Wales has come up more than once, a few times, as an example of good practice. And I'm just wondering how closely we might be working with Wales and in order to fast track ourselves for the improvements that we all want to see.
Yeah, we do work really closely, and although there's a different administration, lots of the local authorities work in partnership and share good practice, and we have cross-border investigations because you're over the bridge in 15 miles, and so we're always liaising with the other local authorities. I meet regularly with one of the chief officers in one of the South Wales authorities, and we share good practice and good ideas. They work for Talbot Council, which has had a lot of pollution issues. And in the past, we've had issues with Avonmouth, so there's a good link. There's a similar industrial area. So we work really closely and we try and learn off them. And they often, some of the contacts I've got will ask me what my advice is, because they've heard we've dealt with something in Bristol. As part of the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, there are various working groups as well. And stories and articles are published in the magazines, professional magazines, so that when we're reading those, we can pick up on ideas or find out about what's going on in other parts of the country. Because in Scotland as well, there are other issues. And we've been on joint calls with the Welsh Government representatives, Scottish representatives and English representatives to deal with, for example, an outbreak involving infectious disease, which has crossed over all boundaries. So we work really, really closely with all the other administrations. Thanks.
Right. If there are no other questions, so I'll just thank you, Adrian, and all of your teams who do pass this on from the committee for the important work that you do right across the council, which a lot of citizens only turn to when there's a problem. But if you weren't there, then there would be terrible problems all over the city. And I do encourage all members to look up the Food Standards Agency ratings, because they are there to find, but you have to download the website in order to do it. Would you add something?
Just to say thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone.
Great. So this is a report for noting. We've got the report, and we've had a good discussion about it, and we're noting both the responsible discharge of the statutory duties that Christina, Adrian and their team have, but also the duties that the council takes on to do as well. So can we agree that we've noted this report? Thank you very much. Right. We'll now have a 10-minute break. So according to my phone, the clock is completely stopped. It's now just 11 o'clock. So if we can come back by 10 past 11, and then we'll get our second annual report from the Trading Standards team. from service teams across the council, and this one is on our trading standards service. And I have monthly updates and sometimes in between updates as well from the team about this. And again, just like the environmental health team that we've just heard from, they do an important work right across a whole range of issues. You'll hear from John Martin, the head of service, shortly, but John and I first met about 12, 13 years ago, I think, when I was chair of the National Committee on Public Health and Smoking in particular, and we talked about tobacco control all those years ago, and this is an important issue that John still covers and is still very important to me. But what I've learned over the last 16 months that his team are responsible for a vast range of other issues as well that are of concern to us and to the public. So we've had a change of the guard at the top table. So Sean and John, if you'd like to introduce yourselves. And we've also got Sarah with us as well. So can the three of you introduce yourselves and then give the introduction to the report, and then we'll move on to questions.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'm Sean Taylor. I'm head of highways, which I'm sure most of the councillors will know. And I'm thinking, why is Sean here as head of highways? Should we say John's service, which sits within my service, actually delivers a number of other aspects as well, events and licensing, which actually got lots of synergies with a number of my services within the head of highways. And actually, it's been a real joy to have the service come into my service and look after. And I've got involved myself, like Stephen was saying earlier about going on visits. I've been on the visits myself to understand the service and what it does. So it seems a little strange, I can understand that, but my service is extremely broad already, and maybe we do need to change the title at some point, but I'm not sure what that would be. I will say I'm not the expert in this, and the report has been drafted mainly by Sarah and John, and like I said, I'm really, it's a pleasure to work with such professionals and such a great team, and I'm really pleased with the report, and I think it was a really great thing to bring forward to showcase the good work the team do. So I will hand over to John and to Sarah.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Chair, for inviting us to produce this annual report. I think it's the first time I've produced an annual report like this, and obviously Sarah Saunders here, who is the Trading Standards Manager, takes all the credit for drafting the report. Committee, I presume you've all read the paper, so I am not going to be reading through it line by line. What I will do is provide an overview of the key sort of heads of titles. So the introduction. We are a statutory service. We're the oldest statutory service in the country. We are born out of weights and measures legislation. So we are the weights and measures authority, although that forms a very small part of our business now. In terms of dimensions, we're relatively small, but we pack an enormous punch, as you'll see as you read through the paper. We have 10 qualified officers. We have 4 apprentices within the service, so that's a lot of apprentices. 2 of those are funded directly from the new legislation coming through for tobacco and vapes. So that's direct funding, which is funding those 2 apprentices. Just like Adrian's team, we have a deficit of resources nationally. So there is a national apprentice scheme in place for trading standards funded through that new legislation, which is coming through Parliament now. We work across a very broad range of functional activities, as you see in the report: weights and measures, fair trading, tobacco, vapes, consumer safety, dog warden service, animal health. These are all services which are embedded within the Trading Standards Service. It's not really a Cuprinol name to Trading Standards. There is a very wide range of activity taking place. We've tried to illustrate the sort of work that we do. We have enormous demand on the service. We cannot meet the demand on the service. So we have adopted it's a national scheme called MARILE, which is a tasking process, which is a scoring matrix, which enables us to effectively look at problems as they're coming into the service and complaints, score them so we can allocate them accordingly. It does mean that some work doesn't get done necessarily. You know, that is just the reality of the demand on the service. Some things do not get done because we have insufficient resources. As I say, I'm not going to take you through everything. As the chair has alluded to, tobacco and vapes does feature highly in our work, necessarily because it is a public health objective to reduce prevalence across the city. There is an enormous amount of illicit tobacco within the city. There is also a lot of vaping and vapes. If you go back 5 years, nobody knew about vapes. Now everyone's talking about vapes, and there is emerging evidence as to the dangers associated with vaping. It's like we've been given a completely new service to look at because of the amount of vaping. It's created a huge demand increase on the service. Someone's just teasing me as I'm trying to present. So in terms of demand there, I've given some figures there. So over 5,000 complaints received, 500 businesses advised through the service. And what we've done is also giving you some real-life illustrations of the work that's been undertaken by the team throughout the year, really just to try and animate it, bring it to life, what we've done. Those are all real-life examples that we've given of what's taken place in Bristol. Obviously, in terms of a dog warden service, huge concern as a result of the XL bully ban. That has increased the number of animals which have been seized and have been placed into kennels. Towards the end of the report as well, we've also tried to illustrate, I talk about bang for buck service. We operate on a very small budget. The net budget is 650,000, and yet we are producing an enormous bang for buck. The acid test is what we deliver for consumers across Bristol, whether it's safety related, protecting consumers, or in the case of fair trading, how much money we have recovered for our consumers in Bristol. And you'll see there that we've recovered over 100,000 back for consumers. We've also illustrated what challenges we're going to be facing on the horizon. Undoubtedly, artificial intelligence is going to play a major role as things develop. How that manifests itself in the investigations we undertake, who knows yet. Food Standards Agency, the work that we're doing with them. And the evolving regulatory landscape. We know that we've got more regulation coming through, particularly with tobacco and vapes. That will create additional pressure for us. Hopefully we'll see what resources we get from government through new burden funding to fund additional resources to help enforce that new legislation. I think I'm just about done, and obviously we'll welcome questions as they arise.
Thanks, John. Before I open it up completely, can I just ask you about the legislative changes that are taking place in the tobacco and vaping area? There's been a change about banning completely disposable vapes. You can say something about how effective that has been, as we can see in Bristol, but what's coming down the tracks in the tobacco and vapes bill as well is still going through its parliamentary procedures. There are at least, I'm a member of the Licensing Committee, Fee's a member of the Licensing Committee. There's going to be a new sort of burden duty on the council as well to license retail premises that sell tobacco. Can you say a bit more about what's coming?
Sure. So in terms of the new legislation banning disposable vapes, we've been very active, visiting premises. The number of premises that we've inspected, we're running at around 90% compliance. Obviously, we would hope that reflects what the overall marketplace in Bristol is suggesting. Those 10% non-compliant, we obviously work with them. Some of it is residual stock. It has to be said, I think it's fair to say, that the marketplace in terms of disposables is sorting itself out. following the legislative change. So we would hope that that non-compliance rate will decrease as residual stock is exhausted. For the new tobacco and vapes bill, we've only received notification this week in terms of another consultation in relation to the secondary legislation that will be needed to provide the enforcement role for the tobacco and vapes bill. The headlines are that all premises selling tobacco and vapes will require a license. So that is a new licensable requirement. The language being used closely resembles that for premises licenses for alcohol, but it is unclear to us as to whether it will be directly linked to the Licensing Act. It doesn't appear to be, but that may fall out through the secondary legislation that's needed. In terms of dimensions of what that requirement is going to be, so for licensed premises for alcohol regulated entertainment, we run at around 2,100 premises across the Bristol district. For tobacco and vapes, bearing in mind the number of premises that sell tobacco and vapes, we are estimating something in the region of 4,000 premises. So that is going to be an enormous undertaking for us to, A, administratively put in place a licensing regime, and secondly, obviously enforce those provisions. So it's going to be an enormous change. Hopefully it'll be self-financing, because just like the Licensing Act, there will be a fee attached to the licence fee.
Thank you. So more work for the licensing committee, probably, which already meets every Thursday. So
indeed, it probably will be delegated to the licensing committee.
Right. Thank you. So I've got Ed, then Lisa, then Abdul. Start with those three first. Ed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jonathan, for bringing forward, and Sean for bringing forward this report. I think it's firstly a really good example of the benefit of having these reports come forward. I think sometimes the public and sometimes ourselves will think, oh, we want to be making decisions in these meetings, and we have made a decision today, I'm pleased to say. But actually, it's an example of the real value of these reports to bring to light to the public many of these tasks that the council does that are otherwise really unseen. I was particularly touched by the story on page 95 of our packs around dog breeding, and there's quite a distressing image in there. So I'd encourage everyone to have a look of some dogs who appear to be in captivity, kept in bare cages in a shipping container. I recently moved quite close to the area since the last meeting. One of my neighbours looks after local cats, and we sometimes play with them in the street, and does such a lovely job, looking after them with such loving care. So to see scenes like this just half a mile down the road are pretty heartbreaking. So firstly, I wanted to ask, what are the logistical challenges that you have with dog breeding cases like this, in actually being able to identify the criminals and the criminal organisations that are delivering these programs, which are distressing and abusive to animals?
Okay, so that's quite a complex question. I think Sarah and I are going to have to do a bit of a double act on this, and if I may start, Sarah. So with dog breeding, it's supposed to be a licensable activity where there are 2 or more litters bred from the animal in 12-month period, isn't it? 12-month period. The sale of those animals are so frequently done online via social media, Facebook, whatever. We do not have direct access to those Facebook pages. Why would we? We can't. So detection becomes a problem. So it's only through complaints from victims, the consumers, where we're able to start pulling together the picture and identifying the sellers. We may get intelligence in from neighbours, etc., that there's animals, large numbers, etc. It is particularly difficult. And this particular case, obviously, is named in there, Attilia Kovacs. The history of that particular case, it goes back a number of years. He was prosecuted previously by us. They make substantial sums of money out of breeding animals. That's why they do it. It's not done as a hobby. It's not done because they want to. It's done because they make substantial sums of money. You've got animals exchanging hands for thousands of pounds And those are the real pictures of how the animals were being kept, let alone the costs which we had to incur once we seized the animals, because we had to care for them in kennels, put them into a fit state for rehoming, which thankfully we did with the exception of one of those animals. It is very complex. Our officers are highly skilled investigators. You know, I won't go into some of the tactics that we have to deploy, but they are highly skilled at what they do to be able to bring these people to justice. And very dedicated, because it is emotionally very difficult for them. You know, they're all animal lovers. You know, particularly our animal health officers. It is very difficult when you see animals in such distress.
I'm really glad that you reflected there, Jonathan, on that being not just a technically difficult job, but an emotionally difficult job for the people who are going to be drawn into working in that sector. Clearly, like with vets, you know, like with other animal practitioners, clearly do it for their love of the animals themselves. So that must be really hard. I want to ask a separate question around tobacco and vapes, if that's okay. So I'm an ex-smoker myself. I quit in 2019, and when I was a smoker, I would switch between cigarettes and refillable vapes. The market has changed quite significantly. When there was a trend towards refillable vapes at that point, it is very much more around disposable vapes. And I was particularly shocked to hear in a documentary recently that, so any smokers or ex-smokers listening will know that Marlboro Red cigarettes are particularly strong. They have 20 milligrams of nicotine per cigarette. So it's the equivalent of having a double-strength beer in cigarette terms, I suppose. Generally, refillable vapes, the nicotine liquid that you buy from a shop at that time would typically be in the 10 to 20 milligram range. And I'm shocked to hear that many disposable vapes that are currently on the market, legally and illegally, contain up to 600 milligrams per vape, which is very significantly higher, 30 times higher than a Marlboro Red even. So I'd be interested to know, and this is perhaps a point of national legislation, what licensing restrictions may or may not be coming in around the strength of those vapes, because 30 times as addictive as a Marlboro Red is clearly going to be very, very significant in terms of consumer behaviour.
It's a great question. Absolutely the case. Through, obviously, nicotine is the addictive element. Through the evidence that we have when we've had vapes tested, the amount of declared nicotine can vary significantly. I mentioned the consultation earlier that's been released this week. That is one of the questions which is being asked, at what levels of nicotine should be permitted in vapes. So we'll be working with our public health colleagues to try and find, or to try and give some indication of what we believe to be the right answer. But it is the addictive nature, and of course that's why it's so child appealing with vapes, and that's where you've seen the massive growth as well.
Lisa?
Thank you. Thanks very much for this report. So I've got a question around the challenge that you've acknowledged around the growing threat of AI-powered scams, and particularly around the use of chatbots, and acknowledging that there's a need for investing in officer knowledge to deal with that. Is there a plan that's being developed to ensure that officers are equipped with that knowledge? And also just a reflection on this, that there's potentially some crossover with the work that goes on in public health, where the growing threat of AI kind of facilitated abuse is now becoming a sort of growing threat within kind of domestic abuse cases as well. So can there be some kind of sharing of knowledge and skills around that as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in respect of AI, it is really difficult. And nationally, we work really closely with the scams team. There's a national training standards scams team, and they are working to upskill training standards officers across the country in terms of the use of AI and how that looks for victims of scams. And as we know, scams have evolved really rapidly from postal scams and the odd text message through to chatbots and you know, text messages from your daughter and, you know, things like that. So it's really difficult. And we always do feel like with scams that we need to be one step ahead and not one step behind. So we are working really closely with the scams team nationally to get that training in place for our officers as well as across the country. In terms of linking it with public health around domestic abuse, that's an excellent idea, and I think that's certainly something that we should make sure that we do share any training that we have and make sure that we do share that with our public health colleagues, because I think there are synergies there around not only the use of AI, but also the demographic that may be affected by it too. So I think there could be some crossover there. I'll take that away. Thank you.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Chair. So I think maybe it's worth me declaring that interest again as a cities trader. I've had some dealings with trading standards in the past, some very positive dealings. In the late 90s, we used to have a regular visit from the weights and measures people who used to check our scales, but obviously I think in the last 10 years that hasn't been able to happen, so I can understand the pressures. I think it's important to say that trading standards is one of those services that, you know, that only makes headlines when things go wrong, really, but its work really does underpin consumer safety, fair trading, and even public health. This year's challenges, as we can see in the report, illegal vapes, rogue traders, AI scams, very sophisticated, new challenges for you. They're all disproportionately hitting our most vulnerable communities and residents. I want us to be clear that this is it's not a niche service, but it's a frontline defence for our communities, and it's important that we, as politicians, understand that and support that. And in that relation, I'd like to ask a couple of kind of questions. What proactive outreach in terms of awareness is given to, or is there a budget for, or is there a plan to reach out to disabled people of, but maybe not, English is not their kind of first language? How do we protect those communities in the light of all these new challenges, and is there a budget that helps with that?
So your initial observation regarding vulnerable persons, absolutely it is the case, which is why we prioritise accordingly, and inevitably so much of our service is directed towards protecting the vulnerable person. In terms of outreach, I'm going to ask Sarah to respond on that, but there's been some recent developments and some of the work that we're doing of trying to use people to help spread the word, which is very beneficial because it is needed. Sarah.
Thank you. So we as a service provide free business advice and support across the city to all businesses of all types. And that is a function that we pride ourselves in, and we try proactively to make sure that we do that. It's really easy for us to be reactive because obviously we rely on the intelligence coming in to direct our resources, but proactive, we do want to make sure that, for example, the vape legislation, we want to make sure that we are investing in those businesses that will be affected. The targeting the vulnerable, we don't define vulnerable because depending on what that vulnerability may be, it will be different in different times. And even most people think about consumers being vulnerable. It can be businesses as well. Something like introducing that new legislation, tobacco and vapes legislation, for example, that will have a massive effect on a lot of people that may not, English may not be their first language, or they may not have seen an introduction of such a regulatory regime before, and they will need extra support. So building into our service plans moving forward, we will be making sure that we take proactive steps to get that out there and to work with business leaders, and we work with our economic development teams as well to make sure that things like newsletters are produced, and we work with them to make sure that we get that advice out there. It proactively is difficult, but it is something that we need to make sure that we do support.
And so, I mean, I'll just finish with that there are potentials of partnerships with faith institutions, schools and local businesses to spread awareness, and I would be happy to help with that if that was ever needed. Thank you.
Stephen, could I just add to that? So Abdul, the other place that work to support vulnerable people in the vulnerability centre rather than businesses which are vulnerable, is through the safeguarding partnerships. And so this work, and I know linking with trading standards and others, there's quite a bit of work with the police and partners to ensure that people's assist. So that's the other sort of arm of this work.
Thanks for that. I mean, the point Abdul raises is important because as when the new legislation is in place, there is going to be a new licensing requirement. Fee and I will have seen this on licensing hearings, that what we are looking for is an understanding of the law and the licensing objectives as they currently stand on alcohol. And quite often, if I can put it this way, the people who are in front of us may not be entirely clear about what their legal obligations and licensing objectives, understanding of the licensing objectives might be. Obviously, there's now going to be new legislation coming through, so there's quite a big job of work, I think, for the authority and maybe central government as well, to embed the understanding of what the requirements are for the safe selling of legal tobacco and how to spot illegal tobacco. I don't know whether we've given any thought to how that's going to develop.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a substantial change. So the new licensing regime for tobacco and vapes is going to be a significant change for industry and burden. In accordance with our enforcement policy, we will always work with businesses first to achieve compliance. That is by far and away the most efficient way of regulatory control, is to try and work with business and try and seek their compliance. So whatever means we can work with, and Councillor Malek, I welcome your help and assistance with that, we will try it. Because if we can help secure compliance in the most efficient way, that is certainly most attractive for us.
Thanks for that. If I can ask about lithium-ion batteries referred to in the report and the dangers that come from storing a battery-operated scooter or bike inside your flat or house. Some of those, of course, will be, many of them, in fact, will be illegal for use on the highway. I guess all members will have had concerns from residents, particularly elderly and vulnerable residents, about speeding scooters on the pavement. And I often point out to people, these aren't people who are taking part in the legal never-ending trial in Bristol at the moment of the green scooters and bikes as they currently are. They're people riding stuff that is being imported, bought over the internet, or converted, and there's a reference in the report to that of there is an entirely new industry that we couldn't contemplate not that long ago, of people converting scooters so they can travel at quite extraordinary speeds on the highway. Can both of you expand on how we're responding to this new challenge and what powers are available to you, and whether we are successful, or the police are successful in prosecutions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have been involved in trying to bring together all agencies and teams internally within Bristol that have an interest in lithium-ion batteries, specifically around the use of e-bikes and e-scooters. We have formulated Bristol's Lithium-Ion Safety Forum that began at the beginning of this year, and the purpose of that is to bring together the police, the council and other agencies, including the fire service, who all have concerns around the use of e-bikes and e-scooters in different ways. Trading Standards has a particular interest in not only the illegal conversion of those and the businesses that are operating that conversion process, but also the importation of non-UK safety tested elements of that lithium ion, be it the battery itself or the charging port. And then obviously the police have got their concerns around the illegal use of them on public highway. So we have put together a number of actions that we can take in order to try and reduce the use of these products. The police are quite actively looking at introducing a road safety charter which targets the meal and food delivery users of scooters and e-bikes, to try and make sure that we can work with them to reduce their use of illegal conversion kits. We found a particular premise that was operating that was converting quite a lot of these bikes, and they can go up to 50 miles an hour, which is incredibly dangerous on UK roads. So we are working really well. We've got lots of proactive things going in place. We've taken lots of proactive action in terms of seizure of some non-compliant batteries, and the police are working together with us to identify what the supply and the supply chain to make sure that they are not for sale in Bristol on those. We have a problem in terms of the sale of them online, as you can all appreciate, but in terms of those Bristol-based businesses, we're really trying to crack down on making sure that that's not operating in our area.
And if I can add, the marketplace has changed over the last 20 years with e-commerce, eBay, Amazon. Batteries are in pretty much everything electronic product that we use now. It is very difficult to regulate that marketplace. National Trading Standards have a ports team that will look at packages coming in through Birmingham, for example, but they can't look at every package. So we know that there is a marketplace there where there is a proportion of illegal and unsafe product, but it is very, very difficult for us to regulate that area. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
Right, Emily, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I've had the benefit of a few conversations with Jonathan that are always very, very interesting, and I swear every time I read this report I see something else. The thing that I was just going to ask about now is the green eco stuff, which I don't think we've actually discussed before. I'd just be interested to hear, is this like a new thing? What are you seeing? What are the trends? And also, is there any kind of examples you can give of, what this actually looks like?
Do you want me to answer that, John? Yeah. You can see us look at each other. It is something that we're seeing an increase in, as you can imagine. A lot of people are interested in some of the alternative heating sources for their homes, for example. So we're seeing some complaints coming in around the provision of heat source pumps and things like that, and not only the provision of the goods but also the fitting of them as well, because it's such an emerging area that the expertise isn't necessarily always there. EPCs we're also responsible for, and we don't see a lot of problems with those, but where we do, it really seems to be quite a fundamental problem. And I think, although you can see in the report that actually we've only really received about 16 complaints about eco claims, so businesses claiming to be or to have a green claim, or a product to have a green claim on it. Actually, what we are seeing is that there's an increase in the amount of people who are searching for those things. That's an increased trend in terms of a consumer need, and that will only ever really lead to exploitation of that if we're not careful. So what we've done in terms of making sure that the green eco claims is we work really closely with those traders that are already in the marketplace to work out what claims they're making and what they're using to substantiate those claims. And that's happening across the country so that we can align our enforcement activity with others. And we try to make sure that where businesses, for example, may claim to work closely with Bristol City Council to renovate homes or to help increase insulation, for example, then we would work really closely with them to make sure that they are actually allowed to claim that they're working with us, and we work with our energy teams, and so we've done 2 criminal investigations, both of which resulted in those claims being removed. One was a website claim and one was a product claim. So we have taken some action, but I think we will see ongoing increase in that area moving forward, just because the consumer market is moving towards that.
And so often you see companies, I'm choosing my words very carefully here, associating themselves with grants coming through from government. You can get X, Y, Z. Foam insulation. You know, there's a huge issue with foam insulation. That was being promoted. It's going to be energy saving, etc. Then it causes enormous problems with buildings because they can't breathe properly. Some properties aren't being able to be mortgaged where foam has been installed, and now you're seeing a proliferation of businesses offering removal services. You know, it's just ripe for exploitation in that area.
Thanks. I think it's really clear from a lot of the discussion today just kind of how responsive the team have to be to, you know, the way the world is changing. Like, you're so impacted by, you know, we've talked about vapes, AI, this stuff. And I think this report, I guess, has partly been like an education piece for us to understand what you do. But in terms of the kind of annual reporting, if you were to look ahead to kind of next year, do you have any kind of predictions of themes or trends that we haven't already touched on, like new things emerging?
So we have touched on a few of the things that I think are coming forward next year. Tobacco and vapes we've spoken about exhaustively, but also the green claims. We will see an increase in AI, both in the use of sophisticated criminal activity, but also the use of it by us as investigators. I think we're going to see, unfortunately, an increase in probably the importation of animals or the breeding of animals. I think that's something that I think is so lucrative for those that get involved in it that won't really, we won't be able to, that will be a continual issue. For us, food safety, Adrian's spoken about food law. We do the food standards, so we work closely with environmental health. I think we've had a new risk rating system introduced by the Food Standards Agency this year, and that will affect the way that we risk assess our inspection regime for food businesses. That will add a pressure to us. It may target our resources better, but until we get a grips with it, it will add some pressure to us. And I think we're always going to see doorstep crime and rogue trading, unfortunately, and that's quite seasonal, as you can imagine. People in the winter don't really want people doing their houses, but in the summer they want more landscaping, more gardening work, and we will continue to see that trend as well. So I think we've covered what I expect, and I think it's going to be a bit more of the same as well.
Sorry, I've got one final question, if I can. Have you seen, or do you think there has been an impact of the cost of living crisis? Like, has that changed anything, or not really?
I think if you look at the stats, for example, on stray dogs, that illustrates the point. If you timeline it, COVID, 2000, 2001, lots of people bought puppies. You then got a cost of living crisis. And we deliberately put the table in there so you could see the number of strays rising. So unaffordability of vets bills, feeding the animal, and then you've seen an exponential rise in the number of strays. We're hypothesizing, but it strongly suggests there is a direct link between cost of living crisis and the number of strays to which we're having to kennel. So I think absolutely it's the case. And people are, up against it. Car complaints are always high with us. Cars are getting much older in terms of their age because they're just being kept on the road, particularly petrol vehicles with the clean air zone. So we see a number of complaints rising in relation to second-hand cars because they're much older, much more unreliable. So I think there is certainly a lot of evidence suggests there is clearly impacting on us as a trading standards service as a direct result of the cost of living crisis. And you can see it all the way through.
If I may add to that, just really quickly, one of the things we are also seeing is people's willingness to complain. People are no longer able to afford to let that go. People want to pursue if they've got a problem or there's something has gone wrong or something's broken. People can't afford to no longer just replace it or just think, I won't say anything. And they are empowered to complain. And I think that is both testament to trading standards, empowering them and giving them the wherewithal to make that complaint, but also the reaction to that is that we have more intelligence about what's going on because people can't afford to put up with it anymore. So, thank you.
If I could just come in there. Just wanted to put maybe a more positive spin around some of that conversation in relation that we are actively looking and training trading standards apprentices and what have you to expand the service because there are challenges. We're aware of obviously the licensing bill coming through Parliament, and we are planning and trying to expand. Obviously, it's a difficult situation in the budgetary constraints which we have as an authority as a whole. But that's something myself and the team are working through. We are looking to see what we can do, and like I say, bringing in 4 apprentices into that team at this point in time was just to address some of the challenges which we were already aware of, and clearly that's going to expand. But we're hoping, obviously, we'll get some burdens money or something from the government to help us expand. So it's not, we're aware of these challenges, we are looking at them, we're discussing them. I join team meetings with Sarah and so on so that these things can be highlighted through to me so that I can put those pressures forward. So we're just not sitting there accepting it, is what I'm trying to say, is we are trying to proactively increase the resources and meet these challenges.
Okay, thank you, officers. Thank you, everyone. That was a good discussion, which is exactly what I wanted, because again, this is an example of important business as usual work done by the council, but incredibly important work that we should acknowledge and recognise. And just to sum up on that, quite often we see in the media sort of court reporters standing in Broad Street in Bristol saying Mr. X, Mr. Y has been sentenced or fined, sent to prison for a scam, counterfeit goods, ripping off people by taking money in advance and then not completing the work and so on. None of that would happen if it wasn't for our officers who are involved in this, or people who are prosecuted for selling illegal tobacco, which means not only they are selling something that could be quite dangerous in terms of its strength, but also they're defrauding us from revenue as well, from tax. So everything they do is incredibly important, and that's why I wanted us to discuss it. But all we have to do is note the report. So I assume we're all happy to note the report, and we look forward to seeing you all again in roughly 12 months' time to see what those new challenges that Emily was mentioning might well be. Right, that brings us to the end of our formal meeting today. So thank you, Abdul.
Chair, can I just come in with a reflection? I think that across all 3 reports we've seen a common thread that's emerged, that most of our enforcement teams are stretched and communities in our most deprived wards are carrying the heaviest burden. Whether it's the PSPO we saw and people that are suffering from addiction, or unsafe takeaways, or doorstep scams, I feel that the impact on equalities is undeniable, and the communities that are suffering. I would urge yourself and the Director of Public Health to make sure that there is adequate resource and input from us as politicians, especially, and keep us engaged in any of the work that we can do to make life better. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul, and Bronwyn's made a note of that for the minutes. So thank you again for everyone for your attendance and for the public who came along in the earlier session. And at the moment, our next scheduled meeting is on Friday, the 21st of November. So thank you. Have a good rest of the day.